subscribe to this channel right now. Thank you so very much for tuning in. In a couple of seconds, you will hear Senator Chuck Schumer's original statements against the Supreme Court that might have led to Brett Kavanaugh and other justices, well, let's just say their lives were at risk, unfortunately, because of, or possibly because of the statements of a Senate Democrat that was allowed to state something absolutely terrible without any legal repercussions. I'm not sure the First Amendment, and hit subscribe to this channel right now. You'll hear exactly what he said. I'm not sure the First Amendment covers the intent, protects the intent to intimidate government officials. I'm not sure the First Amendment protects what the Honorable Senator Chuck Schumer stated. Hit subscribe. You'll hear his words in a second. This is the Washington Post. We take these statements against public officials very seriously. I look forward to your cooperation, Martin wrote Schumer in a January letter obtained by the Post. Martin's actions are likely to be welcomed by Trump and his allies, who assert they were unfairly targeted by the past administration. But career prosecutors who served under presidents of both parties say Martin is politicizing the office. Career prosecutors who served under both presidents, that's a meaningless statement. Why? Because whether it's Bush Republicans or Obama, Clinton, Biden Democrats, you're talking about the same political system. President Trump is, you can call him populist, but he's really a 90s liberal in terms of foreign policy. Well, he's a 90s liberal in terms of a lot of things. He's an anti-war 80s liberal Democrat. And in terms of economic policy, we had record low poverty, record highs in household median income. But let's get started. This is what the Honorable Senator Schumer stated. You tell me if he is protected by the First Amendment. Your Super Chat support is greatly appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. Via Super Chat, if you want to give me your thoughts on whether the First Amendment protects this type of political speech, and I'm serious, you know, you don't have to be a legal scholar to realize this type of political dialogue, talk, discourse is not really protected, especially when there's an intent to intimidate. But give me your thoughts via Super Chat also. Is this protected under the First Amendment? Yes or no?
Since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench, we know what's at stake. Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women. And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
You won't know what hit you? What was this he said? If you go forward with these awful decisions, what happened to democracy? What happened to a respect for the rule of law, the Constitution? The Supreme Court, the judicial branch of this country, is tasked with interpreting the Constitution. If they interpret the law and they decide what is constitutional and what is unconstitutional in a manner that Schumer doesn't like, he has the right under the First Amendment to say you won't know what hits you? Just like when Biden said, you ain't who you are if you don't vote for me to Charlemagne the God. I mean, Democrats get away with like 10 times worse than Trump ever said. You could just draw a T-chart. Things Trump said, things Democrats said, without any condemnation. The unmitigated hypocrisy. And then you have devious, deceitful, disingenuous, petulant, quote-unquote journalists who devote their lives to denigrating, disparaging anybody that disagrees with the Democratic Party. That could be the left, and especially also Trump or anyone who supports President Trump. So, is this protected under the Constitution? Let's listen to Judge Pirro.
Yeah, I said
I'm from Brooklyn. We speak in strong language. I shouldn't have used the words I did, but in no way was I making a threat.
But President Trump, they wanted to imprison President Trump for saying go peacefully and patriotically. He didn't say you will reap a whirlwind and you won't know what hits you, you will pay. I mean, this is unbelievable. So he's from Brooklyn, and therefore that's protected. There's the Brooklyn, section within the Constitution Bill of Rights. Within the First Amendment, if you're from Brooklyn, you can say these things. Is that how it works?
I never would do such a thing.
So now he's from Brooklyn. He's using that excuse, Judge.
I never would do such a thing. Look, here is what happened. He said, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you will pay the price.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, Rob, I do agree with you. I'm not sure he's protected under the First Amendment. The super chat. Does anyone else think he's protected, or what do you think will likely take place? I think what's going to happen is that he could very well be indicted for the intent to intimidate. You know, his speech might actually be protected. His speech might actually be protected if there was no intent to intimidate public officials. All this talk about public proceedings, and there's, oh my God, and 4 years ago, the public proceedings in January. What greater example of trying to intimidate or interfere with a public proceeding than telling the Supreme Court they won't know what hit them? Let's listen to this again.
Such a thing.
So now he's from Brooklyn. He's using that excuse, Judge.
I never would do such a thing. Look, here is what happened. He said, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you.
Yeah.
Okay? He was not talking about anything but those justices. He was intimidating them. He was threatening them. He was calling a mob calling out a mob, inciting, as far as I'm concerned, violence. Okay? That is a call to action in real time while the Supreme Court that they're just outside of is hearing the very case that this group is concerned about. It's the first abortion case since these two.
The Democratic Party does not know how to take the L. They are used to years and years of double standards where they can get away with pretty much anything. Secret servers, laptops, 51 intelligence officials, Steele dossiers, and endless statements, egregious billions in property damage that Democrats didn't even care about, but they focus on one day. Hundreds and hundreds of law enforcement officials harmed, injured throughout that summer. The President of the United States being forced to go into a bunker late May of Trump's last year in office. Intel officials, government agencies, media, beholden to the Democratic Party. And now there's a new sheriff in town. It's James Brown, the big payback, on continual loop. President Trump is playing James Brown, the godfather of soul, one of the greatest entertainers, musical artists of all time. Love James Brown. And listen to the big payback. Great song. That's what's playing on continual loop in the Oval Office the next 4 years.
new judges have taken their seats on the Supreme Court. So when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court comes out and says that it is a dangerous threat, you can rest assured that it is a threat. And what are they going to do? These judges have a lifetime appointment. So it's not like they can get them out of office. It's not like that they can, call them or have someone run against them. It's basically politicizing the Supreme Court, and it's basically threatening them. And there are those who are calling upon Chuck Schumer to be, number one, prosecuted. Number two, calling upon him to resign. Number three, calling upon him to step down from his position as minority leader, as well as making sure that some want him impeached, which I think would be such poetic justice. But this is the same guy who said, you mess with the intel community and they'll mess with you 6 ways to Sunday. And look at what happened to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So Trump's statements in January used the word peaceful and patriotic, but where were his First Amendment protections? Jack Smith, the Democratic Party, prosecutors in D.C., prosecutors in Colorado, the Colorado State Supreme Court didn't care about Trump's First Amendment right. They wanted to ban him in that state, which would have banned him throughout the country. The Supreme Court said, nah, he didn't commit a rebellion. He wasn't even charged with that, so why would you unilaterally ban him from? That's bizarre. Then, of course, they gave Trump immunity for official acts, not to end anyone's life, for official acts, a speech. A speech. But the speech was not meant to foment a rebellion. People committed crimes that had nothing to do with what Trump actually said. A person tried to commit a crime, and those actions were directly linked to what Schumer stated. Whether Schumer compelled the deranged person who tried to take Kavanaugh's life, I don't know. Whether Senator Schumer convinced anyone to commit a crime, I don't know. The problem, however, is that there was an effort and intent to intimidate. We know this from media. There are only hit pieces on conservative justices. Where are the hit pieces in the Atlantic or the Daily Beast or the New York Times or the Washington Post or Rolling Stone or The Nation or Mother Jones or MSNBC, CNN against the 3 liberal justices? Where are the articles, op-eds scrutinizing? Where's the investigative journalism scrutinizing liberal justices? There isn't any. Media has tried to intimidate by focusing only on the conservative justices. And there's an effort to, organized effort outside the homes of these justices, which is illegal. Blatantly illegal. And how much more specific can you get? Trump never said, oh, by the way, breach security and go enter a building. But Schumer literally stated, you will not know what hits you, you will pay a price. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That's a rhetorical question. Obviously, if there was intent to intimidate, if there was some kind of organized effort to intimidate the Supreme Court, perhaps with super PACs, perhaps in concert with the top Democrat in the Senate, this isn't rocket science. You have Radcliffe, Patel, Bondi, and others declassify, or it takes 2 seconds to investigate whether there was any type of coordinated effort to intimidate the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court routinely rules in favor of President Trump because Democrats routinely do things that are unconstitutional or push things that are unconstitutional.
Look at what happened to America for 2 years. He's at it again.
So Juan, my feeling is that he was playing to the crowd, but pro-choice people, and I know a lot of them, and I think you're pro-choice, have to contemplate the intensity of that fetal hate that you're seeing just like bubbling out of that group. And he got suckered into that because
I don't think that's true. Look, first of all,
they're cheering the death of unborn children. Hooray!
Nobody, look, President was going after Sotomayor when he was going after Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He didn't.
If President Trump's going after anyone, though, he's writing a tweet that's kind of like a schoolyard tweet. He's not literally saying. See, Democrats literally say that Trump literally means this and literally means that. Trump is almost always very vague and ambiguous. He writes ominous tweets, but he doesn't specifically state, you will not know what hit you, that type of thing. You will pay a price. You have reaped the whirlwind, that type of thing. Okay, if Trump did that, it would be nonstop. I mean, when President Trump writes a Truth Social that's vague or ambiguous, I mean, the apoplectic response is, oh my God, he meant it, he meant it, he meant it. Well, it's pretty obvious if you're a wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat that, becomes the most apoplectic person on the planet when President Trump writes something on Truth Social, okay, hyperventilating at the menace to democracy. How do you feel about the Senate Democrats' words against the Supreme Court? See, there's a spigot, there's a faucet of endless indignation, pontification, condemnation, and preaching and lecturing from Democrats. That faucet turns off whenever they actually do something worse.
The only thing you can do to a pro-lifer is fascism.
He is reluctant to be guiding this one where it's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. They might do it eventually. I don't know.
So Senate Republicans, even McConnell was on board with censoring Schumer.
That was a physical thing, in my opinion. He tried to say, oh, well, that has to do with the election. That had nothing to do with the election. The way he said, we're going to hit back like you've never seen before. That was a real intimidation. And the best you can say is they're trying to intimidate so that the judges vote, so the justices vote their way. That's no good either. But that was that was really, if a Republican did what Schumer did, they'd be in jail right now.
I agree with President Trump, and that's the thing. Why do Democrats, why do media, why do, quote-unquote journalists around the world, why do they despise Trump? Why does a wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat despise Trump? Because he acts like a Democrat, when he feels it's necessary. He battles politically like a Democrat. And they can't stand it. They can't stand somebody that will not take the usual. They can't stand a person like Trump who defeats them twice, who says what's on his mind, who destroys and breaks all of their sacred cows, and who speaks in the same manner that they speak. And honestly, Trump is far less abrasive than what you just heard from Schumer or what Biden said to Charlemagne the God. I mean, the apoplectic, the hyperventilating with Trump is because when you have a political party and liberal Democrats who look in the mirror and say, I'm on the right side of history, and then they lose, to somebody who doesn't have a team of, an entire American political establishment, media, Hollywood, record industry backing him. Democrats might write their tweets in a somewhat more civil manner, but they have an entire media apparatus. So when then Trump is like a one-man media machine, like, oh my God, look what he said, and then they end up saying worse. So Trump actually speaks like them, and they can't stand it.
That was President Trump last night slamming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for these comments about Supreme Court justices.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Our next guest is one of 14 senators co-sponsoring a resolution to censure him.
Georgia's new Senator Carrie Loeffler.
So you have, ladies and gentlemen, already, and Jacob, thank you, Jacob Hawley, massive. Okay, please. Well, there you go. I mean, you see, like, the left doesn't really understand how to take an L. Democrats are not used to losing politically. We saw that in 2016. Thank you, Jacob. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you, Jacob. And yeah, I mean, Pete Hegseth is right here. This is awesome.
Joins us from our nation's capital. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. You know, yesterday Chuck Schumer said on the floor of the Senate where you work that he misspoke, but he did not apologize. It was a clear threat against two sitting members of the U.S. Supreme Court. He's got to apologize.
He needs to apologize. It's a new low for the Senate. I couldn't agree more with the president in terms of it was a threat. It was a physical threat. And I was proud to sign on to my colleague Josh Hawley's resolution to censure Senator Schumer.
So there was already a resolution, but the precedent is that Trump was prosecuted. The difference is that Trump was very likely protected under the First Amendment. He wasn't as specific, not nearly as specific as Schumer in his statements, but Trump was president. He was giving a speech. Schumer doesn't have immunity. And furthermore, there wasn't intent by Trump to interfere with any proceeding. There was zero intent by President Trump to interfere or rebel against the country. Democrats have convinced themselves with these absurd leaps of logic, Trump performed a speech, and therefore, he wanted to rebel against the country. No. Schumer, on the other hand, stated words that were specifically and deliberately meant to intimidate. That's why he stated them. Which also is directly impacting a government proceeding. The Supreme Court decision, eventual decision. And then, of course, you had what Josh Hawley explains is what? Countless examples of vandalism and property damage and chaos and mayhem leveled at churches and organizations, conservative and religious organizations. Not one Democrat cared at all.
You know, Senator, of these 14 senators, obviously I'm looking at the list, they're all Republicans. Where are the Democrats coming out and condemning this type of behavior by Schumer?
Well, this is just more evidence of the partisan games that are going on. I mean, you're seeing it across the board. While Senator Schumer was standing on the steps of the Supreme Court supporting abortion, my colleague Marsha Blackburn and I were introducing legislation to support life. And I think, you know, we saw last week with the Born Alive bill being voted down, common sense legislation to save babies after an abortion that was botched aren't even passing. So this politicization of everything has gone too far.
Well, Senator, when it comes to abortion, that's a special case for Democrats, right? There's a reason you see
politics being played there, making sure that everyone understands that the coronavirus
media defending the indefensible, trying to find some justification for Chuck Schumer's threats to our Supreme Court justices, while Schumer himself finally makes a very weak attempt at an apology. Who is this guy? I mean, he's supposed to be the minority leader of the U.S. Senate.
By the way, Trish Regan has a great YouTube channel. Excellent YouTube channel. Subscribe to her YouTube channel.
But I'm setting the record straight tonight. Chuck Schumer is nothing but a political animal who symbolizes all that is wrong with American politics. Good evening, everyone. I'm Trish Regan. Senator Schumer trying to shrug off his outrageous, his dangerous, his hateful comments that he made on the steps of the Supreme Court. We're going to get to those comments in just a second, but first, I want you to see his lousy mea culpa attempt.
I'm from Brooklyn. We speak in strong language. I shouldn't have used the words I did, but in no way was I making a threat. I never would do such a thing.
Oh, yeah?
So those are the words of a man who is used to an entire American political establishment, all of American media, late night, Hollywood, record industry, you name it. Democrats have had immense, unwavering support. And those are the words of a man who knew that he was going to be protected, supported by even Republicans. So will he be indicted? I don't know. Probably could be, very well be indicted. I think the odds are, if there's intent, he will be indicted. If there was intent to intimidate, yes. Trump, the Democratic Party set the precedent for political speech to lead to imprisonment. They wanted to imprison Trump for political speech. But Trump wasn't nearly as specific. And then, you you can go here, right here. This is the reality of, there's no leap of logic here. Do we know that Schumer directly impacted or compelled a deranged person to try to end Kavanaugh's life? No, we don't know that. But you have quote unquote left-leaning pundits saying a screenshot on a phone means that a YouTube channel is trying to influence a madman. Well, then what? Then where's do you need a leap of logic to correlate Schumer's words? Do you need any leap of logic to correlate Schumer's words to what's taking place here? Listen to this. And Angie, thank you. To my super chat, thank you.
Sources are confirming to Fox that an armed man was arrested near the Maryland home of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That happened early this morning. These are just the reports that we're getting in. And Sean, we know that the justices, there were protests outside of their homes. We know that those were encouraged. And of course, nobody was encouraging violence, but there was a great concern about violence. And thankfully, this person has been arrested. But your thoughts this morning as we get this breaking news that a armed man has been arrested near Justice Kavanaugh's home in Maryland.
Yeah, when you don't tamp down the energy of your movement, the pro-abortion movement, you encourage people to break the law and protest outside of Supreme Court justices' homes, which is breaking the law.
The Department of Justice, Biden's administration, allowed people to break the law outside this justice's home and other justices. Could you imagine if deranged Trumpers were trying to intimidate liberal justices in the same manner? Could you imagine? It's like the double standard is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That's why every American should live in a red state and get a concealed carry and respect the Second Amendment, because you don't need an entire security detail. You yourself you can become a legal, lawful, and constitutional security detail, just abiding by the laws of your state in a red state.
People become radical. They do radical things, and that's when you get folks to pick up a gun and endanger the life of whether it was Steve Scalise on the baseball field or now a Supreme Court justice. Again, this is a time for Democrats to say, you know what, we may disagree with the court's potential ruling on Roe v. Wade, but you know what, we have to stand down, peacefully protest in places where we're allowed to protest. Go to the mall of the Capitol, but we don't protest and attack judges personally or their families or their homes.
And then, of course, they leaked the Dobbs decision. This was all a very organized, concerted effort to intimidate. So yeah, you can definitely indict, prosecute, convict. This is not, see, with Trump, they made absurd leaps of logic. With Democrats, you don't have to make these, any grandiose leaps of logic. There was a specific statement, numerous specific statements from the Senate Democrat, the New York senator. Then you had the, terrible repercussions that could have ended the lives, God forbid, of justices. And then you had, around the same time, a leak of the decision. Then you had the DOJ, Biden's DOJ, allowing people, and who was in charge of allowing demonstrators to go to these justices' homes? And yet it's Trump who is so scary.
I think that would be the right message from Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer, but I don't see that message coming anytime soon, Dana, because they think that political pressure, that anger that's going to come towards the justices may actually move them away from this ruling that may come on Roe v. Wade.
Sean, we're getting a little more details here. David Spunt, Bill Mears, saying the man, well, there's one report out there that suggests.
So all of this is going to change. Why? Because we will have Kash Patel. We will have Pam Bondi. And God willing, we'll have Tulsi Gabbard. We already, John Radcliffe is already there. So when the New York senator said, oh, well, the intelligence community has a million ways to get you. It's like, well, now the intelligence community is actually has the same political viewpoint as President Trump. Let's listen to this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, welcome. It's great to see you again. I enjoyed our conversation in my office a while back. Let me ask you this. Is it appropriate for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to attempt to recruit spies or informants into religious institutions in this country, particularly Catholic parishes? Is that appropriate?
I don't believe so, Senator.
Mr. Patel, are you familiar with the recent actions of the FBI in this regard, including this memo that I have right here, making a list of Catholic churches and parishes that they regard as potentially suspect and directing the potential recruitment of informants and other spies, let's be honest, into those parishes?
I'm familiar with that memo, Senator.
Mr. Patel, would you commit to me that you will, if you are confirmed, that you will finally and officially withdraw this memo and make it clear that this is not only unacceptable, but that it is an absolute violation of the First Amendment that every American enjoys under the Constitution of the United States?
If I'm confirmed, Senator, yes.
Fashionable, functional furniture.
So commit to me that you will conduct an investigation and find out who wrote this memo, who spread this memo, the field offices involved in this memo, because I can tell you we've had your predecessor sit right where you're sitting, and he has repeatedly lied to, there's no other word for it, lied to this committee. He told us initially that it didn't happen, that the FBI didn't make any lists of churches. That's not true. We have it. A whistleblower brought forward the list for us. He said then that only one field office had worked on it. Turns out we know from another whistleblower, multiple field offices worked on it. He said that it was never posted on the internal system. It turns out it was. We believe it's still in effect. Will you find out who was involved in this gross abuse of Americans' First Amendment rights? And will you discipline them? And if you possibly can, will you fire them, Mr. Patel, consistent with department policy and law?
Senator, you have my commitment to investigate any matters such as this one that are important to Congress. I will fully utilize, if confirmed, the investigative powers of the FBI to give you the information you require and also to hold those accountable who violated the sacred trust placed in them at the FBI.
I'm glad to hear you say that, and I'm glad you use the word sacred trust, because that's exactly what it is. The FBI is the most powerful law enforcement body in this nation, arguably the most powerful law enforcement body, at least in a free nation in the world. And to have this body corrupted politically such that it is targeting people of faith in this country and then lying about it to this committee and the American people is unimaginable. I'll be honest with you. I never thought this would happen in the United States of America. I just didn't. If you had told me 5 years ago we'd be reading memos like this, I would have said, no way, that's bad fiction.
Democrats utilize government to intimidate the Supreme Court, religious organizations, Trump supporters, silence conservatives on social media. They did all of these things. Hide Hunter's laptop with 51 intelligence officials, change social media algorithms. They did all of these things. It didn't work, but they had to do these things. Do you think people generally, most Americans just simply agree with warped and twisted ideologies that left-leaning politicians latch onto simply for political gain? They don't even believe it themselves. I mean, you could talk about relatively benign things like you think any Democrat, including Bernie Sanders, believes that Medicare for all or single payer will ever happen? That is almost as much of a hoax as Trump being a Kremlin operative. They don't believe any of the things. The Green New Deal, they didn't run on that. They ran away from it. They don't believe any of the things they claim. We've been governed by not only hypocrites, by essentially actors. People who pretended to care, and their only goal, their only objective was to hold on to power as long as possible. So they're very organized, but they're organized because they had political media, they had intel, they had a lot of support. Now all that support is gone. And like a moth to a flame, they only know underhanded things, but underhanded things, property damage, all that stuff, intimidating the Supreme Court, vandalism. This is all against the law. They've been acting with impunity. But now you have Kash Patel. Now you have Pam Bondi. Now you have John Radcliffe. Now you have, God willing, Tulsi Gabbard. It's completely new. You can't act with impunity anymore.
In fact, it's a horrible reality. The department needs to be cleaned up, the agency does, and rights restored and protected. I'm glad to hear you say that. Let me ask you this. Do you think it is appropriate for the FBI to be sending agents, including counterterrorism agents, to the parents of children who went to school board meetings and asked about critical race theory in their schools, asked about the school's masking policy during COVID? Should those parents be treated as domestic terrorists?
Parents who have the courage to ensure their children are taught what they feel is right, and those who have the courage of their convictions to go houses of worship, in my book, will never be domestic terrorists.
I'm delighted.
What happened is this. There's a lot of great, wonderful atheists. I love Christopher Hitchens. He was an inspiration to me, but his religion wasn't politics. And Christopher Hitchens, they would have turned on a long time ago. Christopher Hitchens would never have accepted the Steele dossier or the policies of 4 years ago regarding shutting down economic activity or a whole bunch of things. Okay, we can just go on forever. Going after Trump for a speech that had literally nothing to do with criminal activity. There's a closer relationship between Schumer's statements and criminal activity than Trump's statements that day in January. But, the foreign policy, Biden's foreign policy would have been, I don't think Hitchens, although he was more conservative on foreign policy, would ever be on board because of the issue of nuclear confrontation. But aside from Christopher Hitchens and the smartest people I know in my life are agnostic, okay? Or I should say agnostic. But the thing is, the Democratic Party is run by atheists, generally. I shouldn't say run. They're atheists, I shouldn't say that. Atheists are very important within the Democratic Party. The reason is because politics have become the religion of morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrats who happen to be atheists. So if you're an atheist and you are proud that you're so intelligent that you won't succumb to fairy tales and, stories that you can't prove with science, then why would you accept a Steele dossier? Why would you try to imprison Trump on a speech? Why would you shut down economic activity when you didn't have to do so? Why would you accuse Trump of everything under the sun because of gossip, hearsay? I don't think Christopher Hitchens would be okay with the gossip and the hearsay. That's why George Stephanopoulos at ABC News had to pay $15 million. So this is what happens when you have atheists who align themselves with Bush Republicans, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld Republicans, the Never Trump Republicans. They utilize the tactics of the Bush administration without an emphasis on religion, while at the same time creating a new religion called MSNBC, CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and espousing stupid things like not having Thanksgiving with anyone who voted for Trump. That's why you have liberal Democrats who disown friends and family, because it's like a theology. If you've blasphemed, if you're a heretic and you've committed heresy and blasphemy, and you're a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat who happens to be an atheist or not really religious or you don't really think of, the afterlife or anything, your afterlife or your ultimate salvation is the here and now. You cannot possibly be associated with a Trumper. Well, because that's the height of immorality. It's about morals. That's why you voted for Biden, who pardoned everyone around him because he was so not corrupt. And Falsey, who made things up. And Lord knows how many times he committed perjury. And all the other, the endless wars and the terrible economy. Anyway, I'm probably not articulating my thoughts in a thorough enough manner, but let's continue. So, if anyone takes my statements out of context, I'm explaining right now. I probably didn't articulate my thoughts in a thorough or appropriate enough manner. But when you have people who worship public relations and acceptance instead of God or a religion, when the be-all end-all in morality is acceptance by your social circle, then you have government going after religious institutions, government going after political opponents like Trump, government going after social media. Nobody really flocks to the Democratic Party's ideology. They don't believe it, and they're just about attaining power at all costs. That's really it. That's why they lost the popular vote despite every single possible advantage.
Excited to hear you say that. You're familiar, I am sure, with this memorandum issued by the Attorney General, the last Attorney General, Merrick Garland, directing the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to look into parents who went to these school board meetings.
And like I said, there are moral, wonderful atheists and like people like Christopher Hitchens and people who voted for Trump, people watching this channel. It's like, it's not a matter of being, they're immoral and moral atheists, believers, religious people, agnostics. The point is that you don't want your religion to be social acceptance. You don't want to worship intelligence agencies. You don't want to worship or revere media. That's the hallmark of today modern Democratic Party. It's all about not going to Thanksgiving because your cousin or your brother or sister or your parent or your friend voted for Trump. What kind of outlandish, what kind of stupid mindset is that? But the mindset is very prevalent because Democrats don't understand, nor do they care, nor are they aware of, many of them or most of them, all the rampant corruption within the Democratic Party that is infinitely worse than anything that happens in the modern day Republican Party with Trump.
And we know from whistleblowers who've come forward to this committee and given us the evidence that, in fact, the FBI opened multiple cases against multiple parents across the nation, I believe, including in my home state of Missouri, another gross abuse, incredible political power brought to bear against everyday citizens. Why? Because they went to a school board meeting that they're paying for and asked about what their kids were being taught. Once again, I can't imagine, I couldn't have ever thought this would happen in the United States of America. Will you find out who was involved in this policy within the FBI, who agreed with it, who implemented it, who encouraged it? Will you find out that, Mr. Patel? Will you do an internal investigation? And will you make clear that those who supported this policy are appropriately disciplined? And will you make clear that the FBI will never do something like this again?
If confirmed and pursuant to your congressional request, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's appropriate for the FBI to target people of faith, particularly those who hold pro-life convictions? Do you think it's appropriate for the FBI to single out and target people of faith in order to discourage the exercise of their First Amendment rights?
There can never be a targeting by law enforcement just based on their people's faiths.
And yet, under this last administration, the FBI and DOJ together brought numerous prosecutions under the FACE Act for nonviolent protests. President Trump has recently pardoned some of these folks, but it also includes individuals like Mark Houck from Philadelphia region, from Pennsylvania, who had an FBI SWAT team arrive at his door in the early hours of the morning, armed, of course, terrorizing him and his children, took him into custody. They charged him with a FACE Act violation. Why? Because he took his young son to a peaceful demonstration outside an abortion clinic. When his young son was shoved to the ground, he defended him. Mark Houck was acquitted.
Minutes that you and I have been talking about. 2 people have died from fentanyl overdoses. 1 person the FBI has participated in, especially involved in the censorship of free speech.
Because we know from the court cases that have been brought across this country, and we know from the voluminous factual finding that was done, and it's in the record, that the FBI and other agencies of this government under the last administration pressured, coerced these social media companies to censor speech of everyday Americans on a range of issues, from the Hunter Biden laptop to COVID, to the Dobbs decision, you name it. They tried to censor them. The Constitution doesn't permit the government to do it. The FBI tried to get the social media companies to do it. Will you end this practice, Mr. Patel, once and for all?
Senator, I will always follow the law. Thank you.
So, of course, he's going to end that practice, and what can I tell you? This is the Washington Post. There's already an ongoing investigation into a New York senator saying that justices would, quote, pay the price, and you won't know what hit you, and all of that. Hit subscribe to this channel. Watch. Keep an eye out for the uploads. Every day I'll do 1 or 2 uploads before a live stream. We'll get the channel rocking and rolling. We'll be at 300,000 subs very soon because of you, everybody. Thank you so very much. God bless you all. Be here tomorrow evening for the live stream, and also keep an eye out on the channel for the uploads. Thanks so very much. On your phone, make sure you have notifications allowed for YouTube. And